Have you ever heard about the active serial killer called the River City Ripper? Or perhaps the story of the killer who took the life of one of the most prolific serial killers of all time? This list truly does have it all. Let's dive into the top 10 terrifying people in history the FBI want you to forget about. Starting off at our number 10 spot, we have the River City Ripper. One of the most terrifying things that exists are serial killers who are still on the loose, especially when you find out that they've been recently active. This serial killer is wanted in connection to 4 different incidents that occurred in Little Rock, Arkansas, 3 of which were fatal. These horrific crimes took place between August of 2020 and April of 2021, and despite one of the victims thankfully surviving the attack and being able to provide a description of the assailant, there's still very little to go on in terms of being able to identify this horrible human. The FBI was contacted shortly after their survivor was able to give a testimony to authorities, and their behavioral analysis team created a profile of this unidentified killer. These crimes are terrible any way you spin them, but one of the most terrifying parts is that they were all just random acts of violence that occurred completely unprovoked. The case has gained quite a bit of attention, but still the monster remains at large. In our number 9 spot today, we have Tommy Lynn Sells. Before I get into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up if you're enjoying the video. It really does help us out. Tommy Lynn Sells was an American serial killer who is responsible for 22 confirmed deaths, but authorities have said that they know that there are more. I actually watched an interview that he did, and one of the aspects that scared me the most while watching him talk about his crimes is how you can tell that he committed these acts because he wanted to, and because he liked it. In the end, Tommy was caught because of someone who survived his attack in the most incredible way. She was able to go on and give such a good description of him that it led to his capture, and she was able to positively identify him. Not only did she save her own life, but who knows how many others. In the end, Tommy and his crimes were deemed so horrific that he received the death sentence. While in jail, he said that there wasn't one day that went by where he didn't think about, quote, the one that got away, which is absolutely chilling. Tommy's life came to an end when he was executed on April 3rd, 2014. In our number 8 spot today, we have Glen Stewart Godwin. Man, this guy definitely has quite the history. So basically, in 1980, Glen was working in California and didn't really have too much of a criminal record. For some reason, he and his roommate, however, decided to make a plan to rob someone that they knew who was once a friend of theirs. Of course, things go awry, and it turns into a botched robbery, and Glen ends up taking the life of the person they were robbing. Also, this isn't necessarily important to what we're talking about today, but it's so unhinged I just can't leave it out. In an attempt to destroy evidence, Glen tried to blow up the crime scene. The explosive went off, but obviously they were still able to figure out who committed the crime. Both Glen and his roommate were both tried and convicted for the crimes in 1983. This, of course, is not where the story ends. In 1987, Glen tried to escape prison and failed, and this landed him at a higher security prison, Folsom State Prison, which is maximum security. Somehow, once at this new prison, he attempted another escape, and this time was successful. He fled to Mexico, where he tried unsuccessfully to be a part of the illegal drug trade. He was arrested again and sentenced in Mexico, and this is when American authorities began the process of getting him extradited. During this process, Glen decided that it would be a brilliant idea to take the life of an inmate who was a member of the Mexican drug cartel, which very obviously slowed the process of extradition. This gave him time to plan another escape, which he did in 1991, and since then, he's been on the run. No one knows where he is. How lovely. In our number 7 spot today, we have Rose West. Rose West is an English serial killer who committed her crimes alongside her husband. He definitely also would make a spot on this list, but he decided to take his own life in 1995 after being arrested while awaiting trial. The terrible pair were investigated and subsequently arrested for taking 9 lives together, with Rose receiving an additional charge for another 10th life. During the court proceedings, against the advice of her counsel, Rose decided that she would testify herself, and what a trip that was. During her testimony, she sometimes was very tearful and very dramatic, but of course, an act like that can be hard to keep up, so other times she was just cracking jokes and laughing. Imagine doing your tight 5 while you're on trial for the worst of the worst crimes. Luckily, it seems as though the jury hated that as much as I do, because they all came back with a unanimous verdict of guilty on all 10 crimes. In prison, Rose West met Myra Hindley, which if you don't know who that is, she committed a bunch of very similar crimes with her partner as well, and the two became besties and even had an affair in jail. But throughout the whole thing, Rose is still trying to say that she was totally innocent and that Fred was completely responsible for all of the crimes. So wild. In our number 6 spot today, we have Chester Turner. Chester is an American serial killer who, on April 30th, 2007, was convicted of taking the lives of 11 women in the Los Angeles area, and on June 19th, 2014, he was convicted of 4 more that they were able to tie back to him. He has been referred to by prosecutors as one of the most prolific serial killers in the city's history, and if you know Los Angeles' history with things like that, that is not something to take lightly. Due to other crimes that Chester had committed where he was caught, he had to submit a DNA sample. This sample is what ended up leading authorities to solving these horrific crimes that he had committed. At the time, these cases were turning cold, but thankfully Chester being caught for other crimes is what allowed them to have a break in the case. In his original trial that led to conviction, Chester was sentenced to death, but at the following one in 2014, he also received an additional death sentence. In our number 5 spot today, we have Gary Ridgway. This horrible human being is also sometimes known as the Green River Killer, and his crimes took place somewhere between 1982 to potentially as recent as 2001. He was convicted for 49 crimes, but confessed to an unbelievable 71, which makes him the second most prolific serial killer in the United States in terms of confirmed killings. Most of his victims were either sex workers or women in other vulnerable circumstances, and through DNA profiling evidence in 2001, authorities were able to connect him to 4 of his crimes. From there, they made a deal with him where they would spare him the death sentence in exchange for the disclosure of the locations of all of the missing women. Gary took the deal and was spared a death sentence, and instead was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. He remains in prison and is currently 73 years old. In our number 4 spot today, we have the West Mesa Bone Collector. This is the name used to describe an unidentified serial killer who is said to be responsible for taking the lives of 11 different women whose remains were found buried in the desert of West Mesa in 2009. It is thought that this could be one person, or it could potentially be linked to some sort of a group. There have been tips throughout the years, and authorities have worked hard to try and get to the bottom of these crimes, but still, the killer remains at large. There have been a few different suspects throughout the years, but there hasn't been enough concrete evidence to charge anyone with the crimes yet. What's interesting about this case is that, although the remains were found in 2009, according to authorities, upon examining satellite images, it is believed that the last of the remains were placed there in 2005. In our number 3 spot today, we have Hebert Mullin. It is said that Hebert, before his crime spree, was quite bright and well liked. He was voted most likely to succeed in high school, but by his mid-30s, his life had taken a dark turn, and he was now a serial killer who would go on to take the lives of at least 13 people. To be perfectly honest, Hebert definitely had some mental illness struggles that greatly contributed to the horrific crimes that he committed. That does not excuse what he has done, but it would be completely unfair not to mention that part of the story. Experts have explained that Hebert suffers from paranoid schizophrenia, and he believed that his crimes were preventing earthquakes in California. He only believed this sort of fantasy more after his arrest because, coincidentally, there were no earthquakes in California during his crime spree, but there was one shortly after his arrest. In 1973, he was sentenced to life in prison, and although he has been up for parole a number of times, he has been denied every time, with the next hearing taking place in 2025. In our number 2 spot today, we have Jeffrey Dahmer. This is one man who was exceptionally terrifying because of his actions, but he was also very smart, which adds an extra layer of terror to this one. Dahmer, who became known as the Milwaukee Monster, is one of the most prolific serial killers ever, and considering everyone we've talked about today, we know that's not an easy title to get. He became fixated with animals at a young age, and if you're interested in true crime and criminology, you know what happens next and how bad of a sign it is. Dahmer dropped out of business school due to alcohol abuse after just 3 months and enlisted in the US Army to train as a medical specialist, but that didn't last long as he was discharged after he attacked 2 fellow soldiers. After this, Dahmer fell hard into alcoholism, and this is when he went on his killing spree. Just to be clear, those 2 things are not related. I know you know that, but I don't want anyone to think otherwise. Between 1971 and 1999, Dahmer went on to take the lives of 17 people, and some of the things that came after included the permanent preservation of the body parts, typically all or part of the skeleton. So, yeah. things were very, very dark. One of his victims was able to escape and booked it to the police, which is of course what led to Dahmer being caught for his atrocious crimes. When they got there, the chief medical examiner remarked that it was more like dismantling someone's museum than an actual crime scene. In the end, Dahmer was tried and convicted and sentenced to 15 life imprisonments, and in February of 1992 he received an additional life sentence for a crime he hadn't yet been tried for that occurred in Ohio. In our number 1 spot today we have Christopher Scarver. On June 1st, 1990, Christopher showed up at the Wisconsin Conservation Corps Training Program office, and there he demanded money from the man he found. When the man only gave him $15, Christopher went on to shoot him. Christopher then went and demanded money from another man and continued to shoot the man that he had already shot until this second man gave him more money. Christopher was caught and convicted for this atrocious crime, but his story does not end here. On November 28, 1994, Christopher was assigned work detail with 2 other inmates. One was Jesse Anderson, who had taken the life of his own wife, and the other was none other than the man we just talked about, prolific serial killer and monster, Jeffrey Dahmer. Well, when the 3 were left alone, Christopher took a bar from a piece of equipment in the exercise room, and he used that to basically beat and then kill the other 2. Not gonna lie, there is no excuse and no reason for any of the crimes that these people committed, including these ones, but there is a very weird sort of poetic justice to that. Christopher was tried again for these 2 crimes and received 2 more life sentences. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski. I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.